as I have had the opportunity to speak to the experts, to read the studies, there is a sense that we must act, and that we must act quickly. The best minds of our time are telling us, in fact, that we have maybe 5 to 8 years only to figure out how to respond to these crises, or nothing else is going to make much difference. These are crises of the magnitude of global war, for example, or the growing threat of the shortages of food and water, the new diseases that have no medical cure, how we adapt and respond to climate change, how we respond to a global economic collapse. These are the kinds of crises the experts now are talking about. And as I had the opportunity to sift through all of the studies and all of the data and listen to these brilliant people saying that we must act quickly, a single question has come to me again and again and again, and the question is how? How can we possibly make the choices of our survival, the greatest choices that we've ever been asked to make? How can we ask ourselves to make those choices? How can we answer the greatest questions of our survival until we embrace the deepest truths of our existence? Who are we in this world, and what is our true relationship to the world? And the reason this is important is because, to a large extent, the way that we think of ourselves and our relationship to one another and our relationship to the earth and the changes upon the earth, the way that we relate to these relationships is based largely on assumptions that have been made by science over the last 300 years. Now, science is a relatively new language. It's a new way of thinking about our world. Science, modern science, we say, began with the scientific method around 300 years ago at the time of Isaac Newton. So while science, I believe, is good, I was trained as a scientist, and I believe in science and the scientific method. The best scientists will also tell us, honestly, that science is incomplete, that there are huge gaps and glaring inconsistencies in our scientific description of the world on the one hand, and on the other hand, before science, we had 5,000 years of ancient and indigenous and spiritual traditions to help us understand who we are in our relationship to the world. But where this gets really interesting is there are new discoveries, science-based discoveries in peer-reviewed and technical journals that now are overturning 300 years of principles and assumptions that science has made about us and our relationship to the world. The very assumptions that our civilization is based upon, the very assumptions that have led to the greatest crises of our time. Science now is sharing with us the discoveries that give us new ways to think about ourselves and our world. The scientists who've made the discoveries have published them in peer-reviewed journals. But here's where the glitch comes in. There's a reluctance in mainstream science to reflect and report upon these discoveries. There's a reluctance in mainstream media to carry the stories and the very authoritative documentaries that are shown on the cable channels throughout the world and in motion pictures. There's a reluctance in mainstream education, in the classrooms, with the teachers, and with the textbooks, to share the new science that makes the existing assumptions obsolete. Why is that important right now? This is the context for everything that we're doing with ChoicePoint. The greatest minds of our time telling us that we must choose now the new directions to adapt to the crises that we face. But if we are confined to the thinking that led to the crises in the first place, we know where that thinking is going to lead us. We must embrace these new truths, the deep truths of science. Niels Bohr was a colleague of Albert Einstein in the mid-20th century. And it was during a conversation that Niels Bohr was having with Albert Einstein on the nature of truth. And for them, it was the nature of scientific truth, that Niels Bohr made a statement, and the statement is the namesake of my new book. What Niels Bohr said in a profound way, and I wonder if even he knew how profound his statement was the moment that he made it. He said to Albert Einstein, and this is a direct quote, he said, "It is the hallmark of any deep truth that its negation is also a deep truth." And I thought about that statement, and I thought, that is very deep. Because what he is saying is that the things that we've accepted as truths in the past, and in this case scientific truths, those are the foundation of our belief systems and the way we live our lives, consciously or unconsciously. The way we build our communities, the way we built our civilization. Our economic system that's collapsing is based on scientific principles, truths that have been accepted for 300 years. Our ability to adapt to the changes in our world, climate change, the growing shift in the way that food is grown and distributed and shared, the growing shortages of fresh water, for example, and how we're dealing with these problems. All of these things are based, the way we deal with them, are based in assumptions of science. Many of them are 300 years old. New discoveries are now telling us that those assumptions are false. New scientific discoveries that are not being incorporated into our worldview today and our solutions. And what that means is that what's being taught in our classrooms and what you and I are being taught in mainstream media is no longer scientific by the very definition of the scientific method. The scientific method states that when we see a mystery in the world, we develop a hypothesis to explain that mystery. And then we test different ideas to see if they support the hypothesis. If they do, then we have a theory. If they do not, then it says we must incorporate the new ideas into the existing scientific paradigm, and that is not happening today, and that is the problem. Deep truth is my way of sharing some of the most basic truths, the new truths that have been discovered and are peer-reviewed in science, truths that help us think of ourselves differently in a more holistic way and redefine our relationship to one another, to our world, to ourselves. And these are relationships that must be incorporated into the solutions of our crises that we face today.